Picture the morning. Not morning in your city, with traffic and phones and the low hum of everything that needs doing. Picture a different morning. A morning in the hill country of ancient Israel, somewhere around the 10th century before Christ. The air still has that dry, sweet smell of late September. The harvest is finished. The land is quiet, and everyone is waiting. They have been counting. 7 years of work, then 1 year of rest for the land, the Sabbath year. Then 7 of those cycles, 7 times 7, 49 years. And now, on this morning, on the Day of Atonement in the 49th year, a priest is standing with a ram's horn raised to his lips. Every person in Israel knows what happens next, because the law said so, handed down through Moses from the mountain. When that horn blows, everything changes. Slaves go free, every slave, not the ones who deserve it, all of them. Debts are canceled. The land goes back to its original families. The man who lost his farm because of a bad harvest, he gets it back. The woman sold into servitude because her husband died, she walks out. The family driven from their ancestral land 3 generations ago, they return. Everything lost, returned. They called it the Yovel, the Jubilee. There is one sound that changed everything in this story. Not a voice, not a word, just a horn, a ram's horn. And when it blew, everyone who had lost something was supposed to get it back. Stay with me, because that horn raises a question that has divided scholars for 400 years. A question about math, about history, about silence, and about one morning in a synagogue in Nazareth where a man stood up, unrolled a scroll, read 11 words, and then said the most audacious thing any person had ever said in a house of worship. We will get to that morning, but not yet. This is not a story about math. This is not a story about ancient economics. This is not even a story about a law written in a book most people have never read. This is a story about you, about what you have lost, what you were told you could not get back, and what was always meant to return to you. Let's begin. To understand why the Jubilee matters, you need to understand what made it impossible. Moses came down from a mountain. You know that part. But what he carried down was not just commandments about worship and sacrifice. He carried an economic law so radical that when modern economists first analyzed it in the 20th century, they said it could not have existed in the ancient world. It was too sophisticated, too countercultural, too resistant to the way power actually works. The text is in Leviticus chapter 25. Moses speaks it to Israel at the foot of Mount Sinai, and the language is precise and unsparing. Every 7 years the land rests, no planting, no harvesting. Whatever grows on its own, you eat, but you do not cultivate. You do not work the soil for profit. The land gets a Sabbath just as you do. Then, after 7 of those 7-year cycles, after 49 years, you blow the trumpet. And in the 50th year, you proclaim deror, that word, deror. It is the Hebrew word translated as liberty in most English Bibles, but its root is richer than that. The root means to flow freely, the way a swallow flies, unobstructed, going where it will. Not released on condition, not free until further notice, free as a bird in open sky. And here is what that freedom looked like, practically. If your grandfather sold the family land because of a famine, you get it back. No negotiation, no buyout, it returns. The law treats the original distribution of land not as a transaction, but as a grant. A gift from God, which means no human sale is ever truly permanent. This is extraordinary. In every other ancient economy, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, land accumulated toward the powerful. Always. Give it enough time, and the rich own everything, and the poor become their tenants, then their servants, then their property. That is the gravity of fallen economics. It always points in one direction. The Jubilee was a counter-gravity. Now consider a man named Naboth. You find him in 1 Kings chapter 21. He is a farmer. Not powerful, not wealthy, but he has one thing, a vineyard. His ancestral land, just outside the walls of Jezreel, passed from his great-grandfather's hands to his grandfather's, to his father's, to his. His name is in the soil. King Ahab wants it. He wants it badly, badly enough to make Naboth a generous offer. "Buy it from me," the king says. "I will give you a better vineyard, or I will pay you whatever you ask." Naboth says no. He does not just say no, he says, "God forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." He's invoking the Jubilee logic, whether or not the 50-year cycle has come due. This land is not mine to sell permanently. It belongs to my family. It belongs to God. I am only its steward. Ahab goes home sulking. He lies on his bed and refuses to eat, which is not a flattering portrait of a king. And his wife Jezebel, who has no patience for Israelite land theology, arranges Naboth's murder on false charges, takes the vineyard. And the prophet Elijah shows up and speaks to Ahab in the field that used to belong to a dead man. Have you murdered and also taken possession? That question is still ringing, because this is what happens when Jubilee is forgotten. Not just an economic injustice, but a name erased. A family severed from its place in the world. Naboth had a vineyard. It was who he was. And without Jubilee as a cultural fact, not just a legal theory, there was no protection for him. Here's what most people miss about the Jubilee law. It was not primarily a solution to poverty. It was a statement about identity. The land was the sign of each family's place in the covenant community. To lose it permanently was to lose your standing before God and man. The Jubilee existed to make permanent loss impossible. God was not just engineering a better economy. He was protecting the names of people who could not protect themselves. Now come to a wheat field in Bethlehem, and a woman named Ruth. She is a widow, Moabite by birth, which means she has no standing in Israel by blood, by law, or by tradition. She has followed her mother-in-law Naomi back from Moab with nothing but loyalty and one sentence that has outlasted every kingdom she knew. Where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. Your people will be my people. She gleans in the fields at harvest time, picking up what the reapers leave behind, which was, by law, the portion left for the poor. The margins of the harvest belong to people like her. And a man named Boaz notices her. His role has a name in Hebrew, Goel, the kinsman redeemer, the nearest male relative with both the legal right and the responsibility to buy back what a family member lost, to redeem the land, to continue the family name, to be, in human form, what Jubilee was in the law. Boaz does not have to redeem Ruth and Naomi. There is another kinsman closer in line, and that man declines. Boaz steps forward. He buys the land. He marries Ruth. He gives back what was lost. The book of Ruth is one of the most beautiful short narratives in all of Scripture. And it is, at its core, a Jubilee story, not because the 50-year trumpet blew, but because one person chose to embody what the law commanded, chose to be the agent of return for someone who had nothing left to lose. And if you know the rest of the story, if you know whose family tree Ruth and Boaz would eventually produce, then you already see where this is going. So we have a law that was supposed to change everything. We have a king who forgot it. We have a farmer who died for it. We have a widow who was saved by it, not through the law itself, but through one man who chose to live as if the law were true. And now we need to ask the question the video's title has been holding in reserve. The math. 7 times 7 equals 49. But the text says the Jubilee is the 50th year, which means, if you count correctly, you blow the horn at year 49, celebrate Jubilee for the 50th year. And then what? Does year 51 become the first year of a new cycle, or do you skip directly to a new count of 7? And if you do, does that mean 2 consecutive rest years back to back? This is not a small question. It has divided Jewish scholars, Christian scholars, and academic historians for centuries. And the answer, or rather, what you discover when you chase the answer, tells you something about this entire institution that you cannot learn any other way. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. These are the kinds of questions worth going deep on. And if you stay until the end of this video, you will hear something that I think will genuinely change how you read the New Testament. Not just the Old. Let's keep going. The debate about the math is real and it is old. Here's the problem in plain terms. Leviticus 25 says, count 7 Sabbath years, 7 times 7, which is 49 years. Then consecrate the 50th year. So the Jubilee year is year 50. But if year 50 is both the Jubilee and the first year of the next 7-year cycle, you get 2 consecutive Sabbath years. Year 49, the 7th Sabbath year, the land rests. Year 50, the Jubilee, the land rests again. 2 years in a row with no planting, no cultivating. For a subsistence agricultural society, that is not a minor inconvenience. That is the edge of famine. In the 17th century, the scholar John Selden proposed a solution. Maybe the Jubilee is actually year 49, not year 50. Maybe count 7 Sabbath years means the Jubilee is the final Sabbath year, the 49th. And the word 50th is symbolic, the way 8th day in Jewish thought often means beyond the cycle. The completion, the new beginning. Some rabbinical sources support this. Some medieval Jewish commentators read it the same way. But Jacob Milgrom, arguably the most authoritative modern scholar on the book of Leviticus, whose commentary in the Anchor Yale Bible series runs to over 2,000 pages, Milgrom says the text means what it says, year 50, distinct from year 49. And the challenge of 2 rest years in a row is addressed in the text itself, in Leviticus 25, verse 21. God promises to send a triple harvest in the 6th year, enough to last through the 7th year and the 50th year and into the 51st when planting resumes. The math question, in other words, is a faith question disguised as an arithmetic question. Pay attention to this. The Jubilee was structured in a way that made it humanly unworkable without divine provision. You could not keep the Jubilee and also keep your harvested security unless you trusted God to back the triple blessing He promised. The law was designed to be kept on faith or not kept at all. And here is what history records. It was not kept. There is no confirmed archaeological or textual record of ancient Israel ever fully observing a Jubilee year. Josephus, writing in the 1st century, describes the institution in detail. He is clearly familiar with it, but he describes it as a law, not as a living practice. The Dead Sea Scrolls show evidence that the Qumran community kept careful track of sabbatical year cycles. But the full Jubilee, the land return, the debt cancellation, the slave release, no clear evidence of it being practiced on a national scale. There is one moment in the Bible where it almost happened, and what followed its failure is one of the most devastating passages in all of Jeremiah. The year is approximately 588 BC. Jerusalem is under siege by the Babylonian army. King Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, makes a covenant before God. He releases all Hebrew slaves. Every one of them walks out free. The people and the officials and the king make a public, solemn declaration. They observe what looks like a partial jubilee, and then the Babylonian army pulls back temporarily. And Zedekiah and the slaveholders take their slaves back, every single one of them. The moment the military pressure lifted, the moment it became costly to actually obey, the freedom they had proclaimed was reversed. The people who had walked out in liberty were dragged back into chains. And God speaks through Jeremiah with a severity that still cuts. You have not obeyed me. You have not proclaimed liberty, everyone to his brother. I will make you a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. But here is what is strange, and what most people miss when they read the exile accounts. When the Babylonians finally destroy Jerusalem and carry the people away, the land does not stay empty forever. It rests. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 21, says that the exile lasted 70 years to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. All the days of its desolation it kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. 70 years of missed Sabbath years. The scholars have calculated if Israel had been observing sabbatical years from the time they entered the land, and they had not been consistent, the land was owed approximately 70 years of rest. The land collected what the people refused to give. This is not a metaphor. The biblical text presents it as history, as the land itself enforcing a law that human beings had decided was optional. You do not negotiate with gravity. You do not negotiate with the Sabbath. And apparently, you do not negotiate with the Jubilee. The question this raises, the one that sits in the chest and does not leave easily, is this. If the Jubilee was never fully practiced, if the land had to collect its rest through catastrophe, if even the most solemn declarations of freedom were reversed when they became inconvenient, then what was the law for? Was it a standard no one could reach? A horizon that retreated every time Israel walked toward it, or was it a prophecy? Now we go to Nazareth. The year is approximately AD 27. Jesus of Nazareth has just returned from 40 days in the wilderness. He has been baptized in the Jordan. He is perhaps 30 years old. He walks back into the town where he grew up, the town where people knew his mother, knew his father's carpentry shop, knew what he looked like as a child. He goes into the synagogue on the Sabbath. This is not unusual. He sits down with the other men. The scroll of Isaiah is handed to him. He stands. He unrolls the scroll to chapter 61, and he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." He rolls up the scroll. He hands it back. He sits down. Every eye in the synagogue is fixed on him. And he says, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Luke chapter 4. One of the most loaded sentences in the entire New Testament, 11 words. Today, this scripture, fulfilled in your hearing. Now you need to know what Isaiah was doing in that passage, because Jesus knew exactly what scroll he had unrolled. Isaiah chapter 61 is a Jubilee text. The phrase, year of the Lord's favor, the Hebrew behind it, Shnat Ratzin YH, is a direct echo of the Jubilee language in Leviticus. Isaiah was not writing poetry for its own sake. He was saying, there is a Jubilee coming that makes all the previous ones look like rehearsals. And the Greek word Luke uses when Jesus reads liberty to the captives, that word is aphesis. Write that word somewhere, you will remember it. Aphesis means release, debt release. The technical term for what happens in a Jubilee year, obligations lifted, accounts cleared, what was lost restored. In economic and legal contexts, aphesis is what you declare when a debt is canceled. But here is what makes this moment electric, if you know your Greek New Testament. Aphesis is also the word translated as forgiveness of sins. The same word, not two different words with similar meaning, the same word used interchangeably. When the New Testament says, you have received the forgiveness of sins, the word is aphesis. When Isaiah says liberty to the captives and Jesus reads it aloud, the word is aphesis. When a debt was canceled in the ancient world, aphesis, Jesus was not changing the subject from economics to spirituality. He was saying, what you always thought the Jubilee was, the release of land, the release of debt, the release of slaves, was always a picture of something deeper. The real captivity is not debt. The real captivity is the weight you carry that no human law can lift. And the real Jubilee is not a year on a calendar. It is a person. Here's the part nobody tells you about why the math debate matters. Whether the Jubilee was year 49 or year 50, whether the cycles overlapped or stacked neatly, the scholars have never agreed. And that disagreement, running for 400 years through Christian and Jewish scholarship alike, points to something the text itself seems almost designed to resist. The Jubilee, as a human institution, was never meant to be fully computable. It was meant to be received. You cannot earn a Jubilee. You cannot schedule one. You can only hear the horn and walk out. Now I want you to think about something. Think about what it feels like to carry a debt you cannot repay. Not necessarily financial, though if it is financial, stay with this. Think about the thing you owe that feels larger than your ability to clear it. The relationship you broke that has not been restored. The version of yourself you promised to become and did not. The years that were taken from you, or the years you wasted that feel like land sold to someone else, never to return. This is the grammar of Jubilee. The Bible is not describing a moment when things sort of improve, when you manage your deficit down to something manageable. The Bible is describing a year, a moment, when the horn blows and everything that was taken, everything you lost, everything that was never supposed to be someone else's, comes back, not reduced, not rescheduled, back. Jesus stood in that synagogue and read the Jubilee text and said it was happening in the hearing of those people, not in a future political revolution, not in a reorganization of the agricultural economy, in him, through him. The horn that had been waiting to blow since Moses first wrote the law at Sinai, the horn whose sound Zedekiah heard but could not sustain, whose logic Naboth died for, whose grace Boaz embodied for one Moabite widow who had nothing left. That horn was not a ram's horn at all. It was a voice. And the voice was reading Isaiah 61 in a synagogue in Nazareth and saying, today, today. So let me give you 3 things to take with you. The first is this: the math debate is real, but it was never the main question. Whether the Jubilee year was 49 or 50, Whether the cycles stacked or overlapped, the scholars will keep arguing. And you can read Milgram and Selden and the Qumran documents and form your own view. That is a worthy pursuit. But the text itself is not primarily a mathematics problem. It is a mercy problem. The Jubilee was structured to require divine provision, the triple harvest in year 6, because God did not design it to be kept by human willpower alone. He designed it to require trust. The question the law was always asking was, not can you count? The question was, can you trust me with the year when you do not plant? The second thing, you cannot out-Jubilee what Jesus already declared. 2,000 years of history are full of people trying to make the Jubilee happen. Socially, economically, politically. Some of those efforts are beautiful. Land reform, debt cancellation, prison reform. The Liberty Bell in Philadelphia has the words of Leviticus 25 cast into its bronze. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. These are not wrong impulses, but they can become a burden. The attempt to engineer a Jubilee that only a voice like the one in Nazareth could actually speak. The proclamation has already been made. The year of the Lord's favor was declared. What remains is not the declaration, it is the reception. And the third thing, and this is the one I want you to sit with longest, the trumpet already blew. Not in a synagogue you can visit, not in a year you can look up on a calendar. It blew when a man stood up in his hometown, read 11 words from Isaiah, sat down and said, "Today." You may be carrying something right now that feels like permanent loss. A marriage, a reputation, a version of yourself you buried somewhere along the way. A debt of failure or shame or missed years that you have convinced yourself cannot be recovered. And the mathematics of your situation, the count of what you owe, the tally of what is gone, seems to confirm it. But the Jubilee was never designed to be confirmed by math. It was designed to be received by faith. The horn sounded. It is sounding still. The question is not whether the Jubilee is real. The question is whether you have heard it. Which brings me to something I want to ask you directly before you go. Of the debts in this video, the land debt, the slave debt, the debt of failed obedience that even Zedekiah could not sustain, which one resonates most with where you are right now? Is it financial, relational, spiritual? Is there something specific you have lost that you have stopped believing could return? Tell me below. I read more of those comments than you might think. And if this kind of depth is what you came here for, the math that leads to mercy, the history that leads to hope, please subscribe. There is more. The horn sounded 2,000 years ago, and it has not stopped.